July 22nd, radar check. My name is Daniel Valles, and welcome to our channel. We've been looking at 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, which warns about the peace and safety calls that tell us that sudden destruction is coming. And it tells us that there's going to be certain birthing pangs, like travailing pangs, that will lead to it. We can see the day approaching, Paul tells us in Hebrews chapter 10. And so when we look at this chapter, and it tells us just like contractions lead up to a birth, the travailing pangs are leading and pointing to that the sudden destruction is about to start. The day of the Lord, the tribulation is about to start. And so the more that we look at what are these birthing pangs and how they are increasing intensity, that tells us we are running out of time, but primarily running out of the days of Noah and Lot. Christ emphasized 4 different times that he is coming during the days of Noah and Lot while life is still going on like normal. And this is when Jesus Christ is going to be revealed at the rapture, right before the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are released and those seals are released, and that's going to completely change the whole criteria and what's going on in life. Pretty much life as you know it will be over at that point. World War III will be starting, and that is the sudden destruction that Paul seems to be warning about when the day of the Lord starts. And it is within this window that we're going to hear the peace and safety calls. And everything is going to change in one day. The sudden destruction is going to change and erase those criteria. Life as you know it will stop in one day. And that's even what Jesus Christ alluded to with the example of Noah and Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah. Everything changed in one day, and that's why he emphasized, I am coming before those criteria change. And so as we see the peace and safety calls ramping up with birthing pangs showing us that we're running out of time and that these criteria are set to change, they're working to change those, we know we are running out of time, the expectation for the Son of Man. That also tells us that the children of darkness are getting everything ready and are very ready to hand power over to the Antichrist, the beast that is coming up out of the bottomless pit. So again, these are the criteria that we've been looking at, and as we see the impact that they have on the days of Noah and Lot, the criteria that Jesus Christ listed, we could see how they are kicking out those stops to lead to sudden destruction and how they'll enable them to pull the carpet under all those criteria all at once. And the sudden destruction is going to start with World War III, but it's going to build on a very bad situation already. The world's already going to be out on thin ice, living paycheck to paycheck, so to speak, so that everything will fall very uniformly. Not just more localized areas. It will help bring down the whole system at once so they could bring in their new world order, easily hand over power and authority to the Antichrist, the beast that is coming out of the bottomless pit. So definitely check out the timeline, download it. You can find the link in the description box. Check it out every single day. There's a lot happening, but especially the more that you look at it in progression over several days, you start to notice patterns and changes, and particularly changes in intensity. And so that's what I'm alarmed about. And in this video, we're going to cover some major developments that have happened over the past 2 weeks. So this tells us the birthing pangs are increasing, the contractions are increasing. They are inducing the labor. And the more that we look at what has just been accelerated over the past 2 weeks, that really gives us a sober assessment and cautiousness toward the next 2 weeks. They're probably going to ramp up at the same tempo, if not more so, which tells us they are really getting ready to kick over the final dominoes right in this window that we've already been looking at. So let's dive on into some of the particulars and then we'll recap. On the 7th, about 2 weeks ago, on July 7th, that's when Ukraine started attacking different areas of Russia's refineries, really taking down the refining capacity, really trying to affect the logistics of their energy system there in Russia, which of course would have ripple effects to the battlefield. But the exact same day, the 7th and 8th, that is when Iran retaliated and attacked the ships there in the Strait of Hormuz. Multiple ships. They were flagrantly disobeying Iran, who had part of the Memorandum of Understanding. They were supposed to organize and arrange everything going through the strait that was agreed to by both sides, but the United States wanted to flaunt that and disobey that and started telling the ships, go through that with your tracking systems turned off, which is definitely not safe in a strait that's only about 22 miles wide. So Iran had to remind everybody, get in line, pay attention, follow the Memorandum of Understanding, and that's how you'll be safe. But of course, that really ratcheted up, starting a whole series of attacks. The U.S. used it as an excuse to start the war, essentially back on Iran again. And pretty much since then, there's been almost nonstop every single day attacks by the U.S. on different sites in Iran. But then Iran's also been lobbing back attacks at U.S. bases in Bahrain and Qatar and Jordan, Erbil and Iraq, all sorts of different areas, but primarily just focusing on the U.S. military assets and the U.S. assets in the region that are directly affecting Iran. So they haven't been attacking Israel because they haven't been involved with this latest round, and they haven't necessarily been attacking energy infrastructure, necessarily civilian infrastructure, Mainly their main interest is to make the U.S. back off. So they're attacking the U.S. bases primarily. But we've seen that continuous since the 7th and 8th. Over these past 2 weeks, it's been accelerated and nonstop military activity since then, making a bad situation already worse. And 2 weeks ago was so important because there are two things going on. The Iran war was restarting again, and then the activity in the war in Russia, Ukraine, with that energy system, that was also going off in a totally bad direction now all of a sudden too. So you had two bad things going on at the same time, making a worldwide situation even worse. And so that's when Ukraine started attacking the Russian refineries, taking out some major ones, taking them offline. But then Russia started really ramping up their retaliation by attacking the energy and oil infrastructure in Ukraine, attacking gasoline stations, and basically making it so that the military can't refuel up, but then also making it harder, removing that part of the energy from the equation on the battlefront too, making it hard on both sides. So you're seeing an increased attack on energy infrastructure in Russia, tit for tat, but it's making the whole situation worse because it's expanding into ships, because Ukraine is now attacking oil tankers in the Sea of Azov and in the Black Sea. Russia is attacking shipping that's coming out of the port of Odessa for Ukraine. And so you're seeing a huge escalation on two fronts right now, started on the exact same day. And then going forward from that for the past 2 weeks, it's been getting worse. And we're going to see how these converge here in a second. But as Iran has been retaliating on the U.S. military bases, they've also been releasing satellite footage, and other people have been tracking this and looking at the same satellite footage too. Iran's been making very precise hits on U.S. bases, attacking computing centers, radar installations, missile installations, where we've been firing HIMARS rockets over at them as well, but trying to degrade the U.S. military capacity in the region. And they've been doing this over the past 2 weeks, so they've been chipping away, and if they keep going for another 2 weeks, there's not going to be a lot left of some of these bases. Some of the bases closer to Iran, we've already been pulling out our refueling planes just because they've been being hit so much. And again, Iran, they're acting in a very restrained manner because they could be releasing dozens and dozens of missiles, but they're just doing very measured responses to the U.S. attacks on them. But every time they fire, they keep making very precise hits. You don't see just all these craters all of a sudden in the ground outside of a building. You see their missiles are landing exactly on what they're targeting. So don't let anyone tell you that the U.S. military has defeated their military system or that we've won. Trump has told you that how many times now already? It's obviously not the truth, because our bases are being decimated right now, and with very precise hits. And so Iran keeps demonstrating that, yeah, if we wanted to really hurt you, we could, because we have ultra precise missiles that can hit you. And we're taking out your radar installations and your missile installations, and so our hits on you are actually increasing. So that's what they're demonstrating. You don't hear that a lot talked about in the U.S. media, but that's very well demonstrated. But Trump likes to keep up the pretense that we're winning, but we're not. But you can see that this is going to get more desperate as Trump is going to be forced to do something desperate to make us show that, yes, we are winning, and try to turn the situation. And obviously, it's almost at a stalemate, but Iran is holding themselves back. The U.S. really can't do much more. So again, 2 weeks ago, things started really going south in two different areas of the world, but they're both connected because the calls of peace and safety, remember, the whole Ukraine crisis really started back in 2014 when the U.S. intervened and was involved in the coup there in Ukraine. But then Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, and there was a lot of calls of peace and safety at the UN and across the world because of the huge impact on the energy supplies systems. And then that ultimately led to Biden releasing some oil from the strategic petroleum reserves too. So that's also connected to these peace and safety events that we've heard. That tells us sudden destruction is coming. And so that's why I've been able to see the larger picture, because we've been covering it, of what has been building with the Ukraine-Russia situation. They are wanting to take down the world energy system, destroy the days of Noah and Lot across multiple countries, to usher in and hand over power and authority to the Antichrist when he comes. So you have to do it across some of the major nations in the world. So you start doing that. It started really taking head in 2022, but then the U.S. has been backing Ukraine and NATO and the EU, but the U.S. has also been providing a lot of satellite tracking information for the missiles that are impacting Russia's refineries and their energy infrastructure. So the U.S. is also to blame in that situation, which is making things worse on the energy front in the Middle East with the Strait of Hormuz. Who is responsible? The U.S. and Israel, and primarily the U.S. is still continuing to make the situation worse right now. So both of these are related peace and safety calls that are related on the same energy supply system for the entire world. They are both related. So it should catch our attention very soberly as Christians when we see these two separate peace and safety calls coming together on the same day, the 7th and 8th of July, to accelerate both of these paths. We also know they're intending these dominoes to fall in the same place in a very small window, too. So what we see accelerating is apparently being aimed to fall somewhere very soon. Of course, all that happening when Trump had already warned the world around 2 weeks before that in the midst of July, the world reserves were going to be running out. And that's why they had to sign the Memorandum of Understanding and the ceasefire with Iran to help buy more time. And that apparently pushed out the deadline a little bit, bought a few more weeks of breathing space. So again, two different fronts being made worse by, ultimately backed by the U.S., caused by the U.S., leading into what they already know is a bad situation caused by the Strait of Hormuz being closed. So again, when we see these dominoes falling, we know they're pushing them over on purpose. They are trying to make the situation far worse than it already is, at the same time telling the world, yeah, this is going to be bad, and oops, we made it worse. Imagine that. So they're doing all this deliberately because they know where it's leading, sudden destruction. That's part of the plan. It's scripted. And then right at the midst of July, that's when Trump reiterated and upped the ante of really throwing down the glove. If Iran doesn't come to the negotiating table, we're going to start destroying their power plants next week and their bridges, and really ratchet up the escalation ladder. Trump, again, the United States, ratcheting up an already worse situation, making it worse with even more threats to even do more damage, which of course is not going to induce a positive reaction from Iran. It's just going to make the situation worse. So that's what we've seen going forward. On the 20th of July, just the other day, that's when it got even worse, because the Houthis, they're in eastern Yemen, they declared a blockade on Saudi Arabian shipping. And we saw just a few days ago that Saudi Arabia had attacked one of their airfields there in Yemen, and because they had been blockading Yemen for a number of years now. And so Yemen finally got tired of it, fired back at the Saudi Arabian airport. But then on the 20th, they basically came out and said, we are going to be blockading Saudi Arabia's ports because they've been blockading us. Now remember, how did this whole situation get really worse within the 2 weeks? Back around the 7th and 8th, when Iran attacked the ships, the Memorandum of Understanding was pretty much dead, and Trump declared a blockade on their blockade, making it totally worse. So on top of a blockade, now you have Yemen also inducing a blockade on the other side of where that other blockade is taking place. But it's also a very important chokehold too. So more blockades. Again, they are strangling all this deliberately on purpose, making it far worse. So Yemen has this blockade, and they basically told Saudi Arabia that if you respond to us, we're going to respond to you. If you start attacking us, we're going to respond to you. You've been blockading us all these years. Now we're going to return the favor. We're going to blockade you. At a royally worse time to be doing all this. Back on July 21st, that's when Kazakhstan stopped piping oil to the Black Sea after a spate of Ukrainian drone attacks they were attacking tankers, oil tankers and oil ports right there near Crimea, right near the Kerch Strait at a major port there. And so this is important. The oil port is shutting down. Kazakhstan, which redirects a lot of oil to be piped to tankers there and then sent out through the Black Sea and then ultimately to the Mediterranean Sea, that major oil port is shutting down. That port, the CPC, is also the location that serves as the main export route for Kazakhstan, as one of the world's largest oil conduits by volume. So that's also shutting down 2 weeks after Russia's largest oil refinery shutting down. So all that happening in Russia with major oil ports and oil systems shutting down because of the conflicts that were really stoked to war again just 2 weeks ago. And they're making this incredibly worse. Then hours later, Trump went on Truth Social and he said, from this point forward, anytime the Islamic Republic of Iran shoots at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, whether it be by missile, rocket, drone, or any other device or weapon, the United States will bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant, including those located next to or in the capital city of Tehran. So now you have an already bad situation on multiple fronts, instigated by the United States, by the way, so Trump knows what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, because they've been poking and prodding Iran. Donald Trump and the U.S. is also the one supplying the satellite and tracking missile information so that Ukraine can attack these tankers that are in the Black Sea and in the Sea of Azov and attack the refineries. So who's making it worse? Most of the world knows it's the United States making all this worse. So on top of that, instead of giving any gesture to make the situation better, he comes out and lays down a gauntlet, basically, that if you attack any more ships, we will bomb a bridge or power plant in Iran. So now Trump is in an interesting spot because he has said they will do this. So this is going to be a test of, is the U.S. really in control of the Strait of Hormuz? Is America really the one in charge here? Because if they don't follow through with this very precise threat, then it shows that Iran is in control of the strait and can just shoot and warn ships however they want. So now it raises the stakes where the U.S. has to react every time Iran responds to a ship with some type of military device. But it also puts Iran in the spot where they have to show that they are in control of the strait too, not the U.S. So it creates a feedback loop that both sides have to do something to show that they are in control. Because if they do nothing, then that essentially cedes that and then surrenders that, yeah, America really is in control, or yes, Iran really is in control. So neither side can back down. It's a feedback loop with these very specific threats. So from this point on, you will see the situation get worse. And as Iran has already stated before this, if you attack our infrastructure, we will in kind respond to destroying U.S. interests in infrastructure in the entire Gulf region. They've already stated that, and then right after Trump made this statement, the foreign ministry also came out and reiterated and reminded everybody, hey, we will attack U.S. infrastructure, and if need be, if you attack our power plants, we will turn off power in the entire region by attacking your power plants too. So this is a dangerous feedback loop. From now on, you're going to see it get worse because neither side can back down. And they're not leaving any room for other side to save face or to surrender or to have ceasefire either. It's a dangerous feedback loop where now it's escalated where it has to get worse because either side has to demonstrate that they are in charge, not the other side. So this is not going to get better. So again, the more that we look at what has been accelerating, not just in one front with the Strait of Hormuz, but now we see the whole situation in the Black Sea with Russia's energy systems and diesel exports being taken offline and major oil ports being targeted now and tankers in the Black Sea, which of course has also increased the attacks on energy infrastructure in Ukraine and attacks on shipping coming out of the port of Odessa. So you're seeing huge escalations at major choke points and energy points in this entire region here. So everything is really accelerated, and then the threats keep coming to ramp it up even to the next level, leaving no off-ramps whatsoever. So when we look at what has happened over the next 2 weeks, we can see the birthing pangs increasing. That tells us the baby ain't that far away, the baby of sudden destruction. They're really knocking out some last stops that are holding up everything right now, intending for it to get worse. And so, of course, the stock market and Wall Street's been looking at all these developments and knowing things aren't getting better. And just over the past 2 weeks, ever since pretty much the start of July, you've really seen the prices start rising as people realize this is going south really quickly. So we see the Brent crude oil price, it's already risen $20 just since the start of this month when the escalation started really increasing. And then, of course, it really hit the fan on the 7th, 8th. So you can see a distinct increase there. And this is with them trying to keep prices still artificially low a little bit too. And so again, with the exports from the SPR and other things, and the World Reserve still putting out some that does help keep some cushioning of the prices down, but already prices rising $20 just over the past 2 weeks, and you're probably going to see it start rising even faster and faster. Diesel shortages, ever since the start of the war at the very beginning of March, pretty much it was really skyrocketed. Then with the ceasefire announcements, things started to ease because people thought, hey, the situation is getting better. But then since the beginning of July, it's really starting to skyrocket again. And you can tell the velocity is really increasing on these price increases too, which gives you an idea of how quickly it's going to be increasing beyond this, because people see at this point, they already know the reserves are mostly gone. The buffers, cushioning, they're at tank bottoms. So everybody who's doing trading and involved in the diesel and the petroleum derivatives section, they know it's going to escalate now because we're already scarce and we're really over the barrel now, and now it's making it worse. So the trajectory, the birthing pangs are really going to accelerate from now on. So that brings up the question, how much reserves are left? Well, we look at the SPR as of July 17th. There's 311 million barrels still there. And it won't go down too much more in the short term, because when they announced that they're doing releases from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, they put out requests for proposals. So different energy companies would then respond and make proposals for the amount of barrels that they want. So it was released in 3 different phases. There was the initial phase where they did 80 million barrels, and they did the bulk phase where they did 92 million barrels. And then a final optimization, they put out requests for proposals for the last 40 million barrels of the 172 million that were allotted and authorized. So they put out the requests that are going to be released through July through September. So that's when they're slotted to be released. But there weren't a lot of people who signed up for this last 40 million barrel phase. And so almost all that 40 million is still there and still not accounted for because nobody signed up for it. And if you're interested in the financial background behind it, here's some of the details, but basically they would have lost money. So the remaining balance of the authorized release was mostly unclaimed by the market due to strict contractual and premium requirements set by the U.S. Department of Energy. While the Department of Energy originally offered up to 40 million barrels of sour crude from the Bryan Mountain and Big Hill sites in Texas, the final outcome saw an incredibly weak market response. The reason for the drop, although the Department of Energy received multiple bids, Vital's proposal was the only bid that managed to meet all the rigid technical and contractual guidelines set by the government. Rapidly compressing calendar spreads in the crude market also made the steep requirements to return to borrowed oil, plus a high volume premium, financially unappealing to other commercial bidders. Because of this outcome, the cumulative total of awarded contracts under the emergency program paused at roughly 133.8 million barrels out of the broader 172 million barrel target. So when they started releasing, the SPR was at 415 million barrels. So far, only 134 million barrels have been signed up for. And so when you minus that, that would bring you down to 281 because this last phase was not. So it's what we see where we are now, 311 million barrels. It's only going to go down to 281 because that's anything that people have signed up for. And that's going to be released through July and into September. So that's already spoken for, but it's still going to be out for a while. So America will still have roughly 40 million barrels in our strategic petroleum reserves, but crude oil is actually not the biggest problem at the moment. The real problem is there's a shortage of refined fuels that is threatening the global economy. Turkey, a major diesel producer and consumer, has also banned the diesel exports, while Belarus has been diverting diesel to Russia as the Kremlin desperately scrambles to secure petrol from India. Compounding the shortage is China. Back in March, as the Iran conflict moved into full swing, Beijing banned exports of all refined fuel to safeguard its domestic supplies. That's been partially lifted, but only to the extent that refiners must maintain full stockpiles. Suddenly, China, Russia, and the Persian Gulf, 3 of the world's biggest suppliers of refined fuel, are all offline. About 135 million barrels of oil are stranded at sea, forcing authorities to divert the oil to other markets. So the biggest problem is refined fuels, the diesel, the jet fuel, gasoline, what's made out of the crude oil. Because technically, on paper, there is a glut of oil. Russia has about 135 million barrels of oil that are just floating around because they're sanctioned. They're on tankers. They can't be sold to certain people, and the U.S. just makes it difficult. The U.S. is the one causing a lot of problems. And Iran has a lot of oil at sea, too, floating around on tankers trying to find buyers. So technically, there is a glut of oil, but the U.S. is making it hard for both Russia and Iran to get that oil to the markets. And refiners are running at full capacity, too. So you find a shortage of, because China, Russia, and the Persian Gulf, and Turkey, because everybody's banning exports of these refined products, that's why there's a shortage, because the major producers of those refined products, such as diesel and jet fuel and all, they're keeping it for themselves. So that's why there's a larger shortage overall. There are diesel, jet fuel, and gasoline shortages. Prior to the war, the Gulf states were the largest exporters of diesel and jet fuel. But while oil can be diverted to the Red Sea via pipelines, there's no such escape for refined products. There's no pipelines to ship diesel out of the area, no pipelines to ship jet fuel out of the area. So again, that's kind of why technically there's a glut of oil out there, but what they need can't get out of the region, and the major producers, they're banning exports of it in other places. So that's why there's a shortage of refined fuels right now. They estimate that crude prices will shoot towards $130 a barrel pretty soon, and possibly even up to $150 a barrel. And that's on the futures market. You're probably going to see it go a whole lot higher than that on just to get immediate delivery. So this is the biggest problem right now. There's a shortage of refined fuels, and you're going to see that impact a lot of the world situations and the economies pretty soon, because the world runs on diesel and jet fuel. It needs these refined products. That's what it needs today. When the war started back at the beginning of March, that's when you heard a lot about shortages of jet fuel and diesel, especially in Europe, and how they were expecting a lot of effects on the airlines particularly, and how the price doubled for jet fuel. And so the airplane companies have had to eat that cost ever since that for the past few months. And so now we're starting to see more impact on that from the first quarter, but they're also aware that if the situation doesn't get better, this is really going to affect us going into winter. Ryanair, one example, just this weekend, Ryanair says no shortage of travelers despite Iran war denting profit. Ryanair's first quarter profit slumped due to rising prices for its unhedged fuel. The budget airline saw its profit after tax for the first quarter fall 34% to $538 million. Strickland noted that a few smaller airlines have failed in recent weeks, with winter bringing even greater pressures from failures to cancellations. I would expect to see much more severe cancellations in the weaker winter season this year than we've seen for a long time across a whole range of airlines if fuel prices stay high. So again, it's a shortage of refined oil products that's causing the biggest problem that they're really short on, because that can't be piped out of the region, and all these exporters who are suddenly banning exports really causing a scramble for supplies, and causes the price to go up when you can get it too. So they know it's already been hard, but because they've been having to eat so many costs and been cutting into their profits during the good travel time, going into winter when it's a whole lot slimmer, you're going to see them really hurting. You're going to see probably a lot more cancellations, and you're probably even going to see some more airline closures too. So that's just with the assessment now. And then as I start looking at the news, how this has really gotten worse over the past few days and weeks, that's also going to change your assessment too. So with the shortage of refined products, a lot of people think, well, America won't be that bad. We're pretty energy sufficient. Well, what country consumes the most oil products? That is America. If you look at the U.S. Energy Information Administration, they have two charts there that show the top 10 oil producers in the world and also their share. The United States is technically the top 10 oil producer. We have 22% of the world's total, but we are also the top consumer of oil and oil products too. We share 20% of the world's total. So what country is going to be affected most by these shortages of refined products? The United States. Who's going to have to be dialing back the most? It's the largest consumer. And particularly when the reserves really run out and we're already at tank bottom, who's going to be feeling the hurt the most? It's going to be the largest consumer, the U.S. Particularly because the U.S. does not technically produce all the oil that it needs. And Trump likes to say, oh, we're pretty self-sufficient, but that's not true, because we have to import crude oil because our country does not produce the type of oil it needs to make gasoline. How much petroleum does the United States import and export? As of 2023, crude oil imports of about 6.5 million barrels accounted for about 76% of U.S. total gross petroleum imports. Now, when they say petroleum, that also includes crude oil, hydrocarbon gas liquids, refined petroleum products such as gasoline and diesel fuel and biofuels. But out of that, if you just look at crude oil alone, that we then refine and turn into gasoline that we need too, we import 6.5 million barrels per day, because our refineries can't use the oil that we produce here in America to produce gasoline, which is a refined product. The United States produces approximately 1.5 to 2.5 million barrels per day of sour crude oil. That's what we need to make gasoline with our refineries. This is what we have to import because we don't make a lot of it. It represents roughly 10 to 15% of America's record-breaking total crude output. So America only produces 10 to 15% of the oil that it needs to make gasoline and diesel. The vast majority of American oil production, driven by hydraulic fracking and shale plays like the Permian Basin, is light sweet crude, which has low sulfur, it's low density. America's sour crude, high sulfur content, is heavily concentrated in a few specific geographical regions: the federal Gulf of Mexico, Alaska, and California. The refining dilemma, though, is that the U.S. Gulf Coast refineries were built to process cheap, heavy sour oil from overseas into diesel and jet fuel. The U.S. imports roughly 6 to 8 million barrels per day of heavy sour grades from nations like Canada, Mexico, and Iraq, while importing its surplus light sweet shale oil. So we produce a lot of sweet oil, but we export it because our refiners aren't really built to turn it into diesel and jet fuel, the refined products. So this becomes a problem if we have to buy 6 to 8 million barrels per day, we're paying the price that the world pays. And we're getting it from Canada, Mexico, and Iraq, which is affected by the Strait of Hormuz, but we can still get a lot from Canada and Mexico. But we're paying the prices that the rest of the world's paying. So as the situation in the Strait of Hormuz gets worse, and exports from Russia get worse, and just the whole situation gets worse, and the price of oil keeps climbing rapidly, the trajectory keeps climbing rapidly, and diesel goes up, all that, we are buying this crude oil at prices that everybody else is paying for too. Because they're not going to pay to us at a loss when they could make money selling it to other people. So America's not going to be isolated from the energy war that's going on right now. America's the one making it worse. You will see it impact America, primarily in the refined products, primarily because the price that we're going to pay for the sour crude oil that we have to import is going to be passed on to the consumers to make the diesel and the jet fuel, which our entire economy runs on, diesel, which we can't produce because we only produce 10 to 15% of what we need, that type of oil. So multiple nations are over a barrel, including America, and you really need to realize how tenuous the whole worldwide situation is and how they're making it worse. America is making it worse, knowing this is the situation. These shortages of refined fuels, it threatens the global economy. They know that. It's because these refined products are already in short supply, and it's going to be getting even harder to get the crude oil that we need to make it in the first place, too. But let's take a larger look at the map and get an overview of what is going on here. We've seen the different parts in play, and we've looked at the zoom in on the timeline. Multiple things are in motion, so that's what you have to keep in mind. The news is going to look at one location and jump around all over the place. We need, what is the larger picture here? How are all these dominoes coming together to fall in one place? Well, the situation, the war started February 28th with the war in Iran when the United States and Israel attacked Iran. And so immediately that caused a blockade at the Strait of Hormuz. And there's all sorts of oil and gas wells and refineries and ports right there in the Persian Gulf. So they can't ship the product out because of that tight little constraint right there at the Strait of Hormuz, a really tight point there, which Iran can immediately, very easily keep ships from going out because it's only about 22 miles across there. It's very narrow. And so this is important because 20% of the world's oil and energy and refined products comes from that spot, that one Persian Gulf there with all the oil wells and all that in the area. Iraq, guess where they're shipping most of their stuff through? It's the Persian Gulf. Because from the Persian Gulf, once they leave the Strait of Hormuz, the tankers can then go down to Asia, or they could go down to Africa, or even around the Cape of Good Hope there, or they can just go through the Red Sea into the Mediterranean and service Europe up there. But unfortunately, it makes it very easy to bottleneck 20% of all the products coming out of there, which are very needed for the world's economy. And just to give you an idea here, Kepler put together these information. Oil, there's 20% of the world's supply of oil comes from this spot. LNG, 20%. Helium, 20%. Alumina, 16%. Petrochemicals, the refined derivatives, 15% of the world supply comes from this area. Fertilizers, 14%. LPG, 13%. Aluminum, 10%. Dry bulk, 3%. So a large percentage of what the world needs comes from this one area here. Because of the blockade, so much crude oil has been bottlenecked in the Persian Gulf, but there has been a pipeline that goes across Saudi Arabia, the east to west pipeline. So they've been able to pipe out about 7 million barrels per day to a port on the other side, loaded on the tankers, and then those can head up to Europe or down to Asia and Africa from there. So that's been able to bypass and take a cut out of the 20%, make up about 7 million barrels from there. So that's been giving some relief to the energy systems right now. But now we've seen increased conflicts since the past 2 weeks, the beginning of July, right there in the Black Sea, particularly around the port of Odessa, as Ukraine has been targeting, and the Sea of Azov, as they've been attacking tankers of Russia's, and Russia's been attacking tankers and ships coming out of Odessa. But then that red dot, that major oil port of Russia's that they recently just shut down, and Kazakhstan just recently stopped piping oil to that location because Ukraine has been targeting all the oil tankers in that region too. So a major oil port right there is also shut down at this same time. This within the past 2 weeks, making two related areas really worse. Right at the same time that Ukraine is attacking Russia's refineries and causing them to stop the exports of their diesel, that's also when Iran war started up again, and they're attacking us as we attack them. They're attacking our bases. they're hitting major bases and they're getting hammered every single day. The U.S. has been making strikes on Iran targets every single day too, pretty much. And so for the past 2 weeks, this is not getting better. There's been no easing up whatsoever. But both of these energy locations getting worse at the same time. And then on top of that, you see Yemen announcing a blockade that they're going to blockade all ships going to Saudi Arabia ports. All Saudi shipping and related shipping, they're not going to allow it to go to the Saudi ports, which includes the port of Yanbu, which is where the oil has been able to get out somewhat from the Persian Gulf. So that's going to stop all those oil exports, 7 million barrels per day of being loaded up. That's not going to go out. So that affects 7% more of what the world uses of oil and energy that comes from that very important region around the Persian Gulf. So now here, again, the blockade on the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is now in effect. So that's really stopping shipping almost completely. Another blockade in Yemen has gone into effect. So now you have 20%, 7%, and you have pretty much most shipping stopping and avoiding the Black Sea and Sea of Azov area too, and Russia stopping exports. So you're seeing a lockdown on a very intensive energy corridor. So this needs to catch our attention that all this has accelerated in the past 2 weeks. A very intense energy corridor. And again, when you look at it on a larger picture, notice it's a particular region that divides right up from the Middle East, right up through the crossroads of the world, right up into Russia, and even the ports toward the north there of the Yugoslavia as well. That's heavily been impacted by the Ukraine attacks too. But you're seeing the energy corridor being attacked. We're in an energy war. It's between the East and the West. And so that's how Russia and China see it. That's why they're helping out Iran, because they see Iran cannot back off. Because the U.S. wants to take full control of this energy region, just from a military strategic point of view. So they can't let Iran lose. They have to back Iran with satellite information, tracking information, China's GPS system that they're using for their very precise missile hits. Russia seems to be giving components to Iran as well, and technology helps as well. And then Iran's been helping Russia with drone technology too. So the major players see this as an energy war. And that's why I say you will see intervention. Because this isn't just about the Strait of Hormuz. This is not just about Iran. This is not just about oil and ships and all the plaudits that America tries to tell people it is. It's a war. It's a large energy war to take dominance in the world of the energy war against Russia and China, who are very large. Russia's a large energy provider. If you impact and control a major source of energy, you will directly impact China on a military and strategic point of view, because you'll hold strategic hold on the energy systems of the world. And you'll also be able to start blackmailing a lot of other nations too. So that's how the East and West, that whole conflict is coming to a head. That's why you will see intervention. When it starts getting really apparent that this is going to put a world of hurt on everybody and a diplomatic solution will not be reached, that's why Russia, China, maybe somebody else will have to do some type of intervention to stop the United States. This is also why Iran cannot back down. This is why they cannot surrender, because they know what is at stake here. It's going to yield completely to American interests controlling this entire region. And if they let the U.S. walk all over them in the Strait of Hormuz, then they'll be able to just walk in and completely take over control of their nation eventually, and further encroach in Russia and China as well too. So it's a whole energy war throughout this whole region. This is the front. This proxy war going on here, using the Gulf states as an American proxy against Iran, which is a larger proxy for Russia and China, the whole system, just like America is using Ukraine as a proxy in the war against Russia. It's energy war on multiple fronts, but it is now coming to a head, and both of these fronts are being accelerated within the past 2 weeks, which tells you they are deliberately making it worse on purpose, and that it will probably be coming to a head pretty soon, because that's what they seem to be pushing for. They've really put down the threats where neither side can back down, so somebody is really going to have to assert themselves and give the other person a black eye, and somebody is going to have to make it clear who the king of the hill is. And that's going to have to happen very soon, the way it's going. So again, this is why we've been looking at this energy logistics system. It's speaking Greek to most people. The average person don't know about all this stuff going behind the scenes, but it's so crucial to understand what is holding up the entire world economy. What is holding up these days of Noah and Lot that Jesus Christ described? What keeps all those wheels spinning along at the same time? It's what they all have in common. the energy system, the logistics that keep our world running. And so the Strait of Hormuz, they closed the shipping through the strait, immediately shut down 20%. And so then the world started having to go on their reserves, their stockpiles that they had, the commercial inventories. Cushing and all those inventories started going to tank bottoms. And so that's and then starting to dip into their strategic petroleum reserves. And then everybody knew where it was going. So even from the beginning of the war, they knew they were going to have to start releasing from their reserves, which they've been doing. We've been running on our reserves. And so here, when we already know the world is running close to tank bottoms, we're running on fumes, the needle is moving very close to empty. Oh, let's make the situation worse. And of course, using your own reserves, that puts strain on your refineries because there's already shortages. You're running your refineries at max because it's already hard to get supplies that had come out of the Strait of Hormuz. So now you're having to make up the difference. Your refineries are having to make it, which means you're running wide open on those, which can cause mechanical problems and shutdowns of your refineries too. So that causes a shortage of refined products, diesel, jet fuel, gasoline. And so that puts strain on the overall system. And for the average person, they aren't necessarily aware of it, but they know, hey, yeah, there's some shortages, there's some cancellations of flights, and yeah, some fishing industries are impacted and other things. But everything still seems to be heading along. But they aren't aware of how the world is now on thin ice, particularly as the SPRs start getting very critical, the reserves start getting down to low levels and tank bottoms. That's when things start getting stressed. And so as it starts becoming more apparent to the public that, hey, wait a minute, America's making this situation in the Strait of Hormuz worse on purpose, and this is not going to get better. That means diesel is about to go through the roof, jet fuel is about to go through the roof, all these refined products are about to go through the roof price-wise. We are going to have to really dial back on all of our industries, our production, our economy. Everything's going to have to rapidly dial back. And so they also know pretty soon, as they start looking at the situation, of the logistical situation is broken. The United States broke the system. And that's when they'd really panic. That's when bedlam would really set in, like Donald Trump even warned. Yeah, if you let it go to its normal route, there is going to be bedlam. There's going to be mass panic when they realize you broke everything. But the governments know that, and they will want to intervene before the public is really aware of how bad things are. So we're on very thin ice right now. The needle is moving toward empty. But so far, the public is not really aware of how bad the situation is, which means the government will intervene before the public finds out. So that tells us how short we have of the days of Noah and Lot, that they are now kicking out the final stops to make it worse on purpose. And if they have done this over just the past 2 weeks, then that gives us an idea of how the labor pangs are being induced right now to be very worse. We saw right at the beginning of July, around the 5th and 6th, that's when the sun was in line with Sirius, reminding us of our bridegroom, right in line with the morning star, coming quickly, reminders of that. And then just within hours of that, that's when things really went south, but they had been building up a few days before that. That was the start of the Iran war again, right as the midst of July was saying, that's when we're going to be running out of reserves. And then 20th, 21st, 22nd, things being made multiple times worse. The Yemen blockade, Russia refineries and ports shutting down, and Trump threatening to destroy power plants and bridges. And he's going to, in kind, start attacking Iran infrastructure for every ship that they attack. And so now making it to where neither side can back down. It will get worse because he's making it to that position where neither side can get worse. In just a few days on the 29th, that's when the sun is going to be in line with where Jupiter is, right at the Beehive constellation. Beautiful reminder of our Father's house. And then for that duration, up and through August 8th, that's Jupiter will be at that Beehive constellation, the King at the beautiful reminder of our Father's house, up until about the 8th, when Jupiter is also going to be rising as a morning star at the same time that Sirius, the morning star, which means coming quickly, is also rising as a morning star. A beautiful reminder of the celestial sign, the triple morning star that the Lord showed us back on August 12th, 2025. And a reminder of that on March 11th, when this war was really kicking off. And just again reminds me here in a few days on August 12th is going to be the 14th anniversary of our ministry starting for me personally, and just how the Lord started and set so many things in motion. So I'm not surprised that on the celestial clock, seeing Jupiter the King at the Beehive constellation in Cancer, just like it was back at 2014 with the start of the celestial signs with the first blood moon, Lord has already shown us this location, that we have full expectation of this story that was declared by the heavens, the speech, the voice, the language, the handiwork, ending somewhere right around here. That has been our expectation for many months now. And so to see the enemy ramp things up within the past 2 weeks and really make things in an irreversible situation right in this expectation, right during the dog days of summer, right when we are expecting our bridegroom, it all tracks and lines up exactly with what our Father's been showing us and giving us wisdom about. And so again, when we see them inducing such powerful birth pangs and the trajectory that that's sending oil prices and diesel prices and just making the situation really worse and throwing down the gauntlet, at that rate, we should soberly expect, just from a logistical point of view, that something really bad is going to accumulate within the next 2 weeks. Because they are definitely pushing towards something to break and go wrong relatively soon. And for somebody to get a black eye or attempt to give somebody a black eye, the more desperate they make the situation, the more desperate actions you're going to see from people. But it also sets a plausible explanation for the world of why sudden destruction came. Because there was an energy war, ultimately between Russia and China and America. And they had their various proxies, and that's what they were distracting the world with, and that's what they were using to try to reach each other. But eventually it will come to a head, and that's probably what you're going to see as a plausible reason behind the sudden destruction, is one side is going to have to intervene to stop the energy war, to declare one side or the other as the winner of this energy war, because they can't let the energy war go on too long, because they're already at reserves, already at tank bottoms. Somebody is going to have to be a winner here real soon, which means they're going to have to push the other guy off the mountain so they could be king of the mountain. So the rate is going. We're going to see something pretty soon. That's all we can say. We watch and we're sober about what the assessment should be. We're sober as we watch the birthing pangs increase, already know where it's going. We know it's not going to get better. We know we've been warned about it from a biblical perspective. And so we should be very sober about that. It does appear, we should come to a conclusion that time is very, very short here, which means we need to be waking up, aware of what's going on, focusing on what matters of eternal value, and giving our attention to the Lord, drawing nigh to Him with a true heart, making sure our fellowship is where it should be with the Lord, and then provoking one another into love and to good works so much more as we see the day approaching, making sure we are bringing fruit forth here at this late hour, making sure we are found girded up with our sleeves rolled up, with our work gloves on, with our work boots on, being found girded in His service with our lights burning. Friends, we need to be watching ourselves. We need to be sober about what's happening in the world, that the days of Noah and Lot are rapidly coming to a close. We see the labor pangs increasing, the contractions increasing. Definitely avail yourselves of the PDF resources listed in the description box. Be ready, running for the prize. Christ put a big emphasis on how are we going to be found when He comes. He wants us to be found with our lights burning. And friends, we have heard so many trumpet calls at midnight that have told us, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet Him. So with that, there are certain requirements that we are told to do. We should be rising up. We should be trimming our lamp to shine even brighter. We should be girding up. We should be lifting one another up. We should be going out to meet Him, hearing Him, heeding and obeying Him, loving Him and serving Him first and highest above all else, drawing nigh with a true heart till He comes. Maranatha.